This year. I'm going to do a quick review over what we learned last year, particularly for those of you who were not in confirmation last year. That way you get some kind of basis. You will cover this again in detail later, but I'm just going to do a quick run through to kind of hopefully catch you up and then begin starting. Last year we started with the two propositions. One, there is God, and there isn't God. And do you remember what we said? If there isn't a God,
no right.
Yeah, there's no right and wrong. Essentially, we make up what is right and wrong, so those who have the most power get to call the shots, which leads to kind of chaos, no justice, no fairness. And y'all do remember, y'all did think fairness was a good thing, right? You don't have to do that one again. But if there is a God, then we know there is right and wrong. We know there will be justice. We know there is law. We don't make it up. God does. But there was a problem, and the problem was, even though we know the law, even though we do know what's right and wrong, do we follow it? Do you? Do you always do what is right?
Nope.
No, we don't. As I said, every culture, every philosophy, every religion has the same thing, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Every religion, everything tells you to do that. The corollary to that is nobody does it. We don't do it. So there's a problem. We don't follow the law. We don't do things right. And because of that, there is a break in the relationship between us and God. And no matter how hard we try to make that complete, we can't. And so instead of us trying to do it, God does it for us. That's briefly what we covered last year. And what we're going to start doing this year is talk about how does God make the relationship between Him and us right. How does God make everything cool? And what we are going to focus on and talk about intensely this year is that word right there. What word is that? What? I can't hear you.
Gospel.
Gospel. Do you know what that means? It's taken from a Greek word evangelion, which in Greek, this right here is actually the English letters EU, and it can be translated good. Angelion is actually from the root word, which looks kind of like what?
Angel.
Angel, which is a messenger who brings news. Gospel is good news. And you notice I made it with a capital G, because when you turn on the TV, sometimes you hear good news, right? When you go to school and you get your grades back and you passed, it's good news, right? We get hit with good news all the time, but it's not the gospel. And so what we are going to take some time to do is kind of wade through Scripture, and we're going to look at the importance of what is the gospel. Because the Bible is full of good news, and it eventually gets us to the gospel. So that's what we're going to be going through in the process of this year. And I want to start with the Bibles you have with you. Please take them out and turn to Genesis chapter 1. If you don't have a Bible, I've got one for you right here. Did anybody have a hard time finding Genesis chapter 1? Shouldn't have. It's pretty easy. Right at the very beginning. Okay, we're going to look at this and we're going to kind of go step by step. I've got about 30 minutes that I want to try to get through most of the rest of the class in and begin talking about. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 says, in the beginning when who?
God.
When God created the heavens and the earth. Who is this book about?
God.
God. Some people think the Bible is about themselves. Sometimes people think the Bible is about how we're supposed to act and the things we're supposed to do. They're misguided. The Bible isn't about you. It's not about us. The Bible is about who?
God.
It says so in the opening statement. We have to make the distinction. We have to focus that this book is trying to tell us something about Him. And the problem sometimes is when we start talking to other people, particularly people who are like scientists, who are atheists, who think that God doesn't exist and that this world is all that there is. They will say, okay, what evidence do you have for God? What kind of proof do you have? Like, you know, I know this is a trash can, I can see it, I can touch it, I can measure it. I can do all sorts of things to kind of prove that this trash can is here. Can I do that with God? Can I see God?
No.
Can I touch Him?
No.
Can I measure Him?
No.
No, I can't. So how do I know God exists? There's a word that we use in Christianity to talk about that. Revelation. Now, for some, this word has a bad connotation. They say, well, you're just making stuff up. You know, revelation doesn't count as knowledge. Really. What's my favorite color?
It's green. Orange.
We don't know, you haven't exposed it.
Yellow.
You don't know, do you? I haven't told you. Okay, if you take me into the hospital and you do an MRI on me and you try to fit, will you discover what my favorite color is?
No.
Will you discover what my favorite food is?
Mr. Professor X.
Yeah, if you sit there and watch what I eat and how I dress every day, will you be able to figure that out?
Maybe.
Maybe? Do you think I eat the same food every day?
No.
No. Do you think I go out to eat at the same restaurants all the time?
No.
How would you be able to figure out what's my favorite?
By asking.
By asking, somehow, some way, shape, or form, you will find out what I like and more about me, not by simply observing me, not by watching me, not by measuring me, but by doing what? Asking and then listening to what I tell you.
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color is blue, by the way.
Oh,
Knew it.
First try.
Got
it.
Blue, yeah, some of you got it at first try. So, revelation is knowledge that we get when we are in a relationship. When you're in a relationship with another person, that person has to reveal themselves to you. Now, do we reveal ourselves to one another fully? No, not generally. Why? Most of the time, because we're afraid. Because if somebody finds out our weakness, they're going to step on us. They're going to use it against us. That's just the way the world tends to work. But the interesting part about that is we will understand as we go through that God does try to reveal Himself as fully as He possibly can to us. And we'll understand that as we go through that. God wants you to know about Him. Particularly, He wants you to know how much He loves you. We'll get through that as we continue to go through our confirmation class. But we believe that God does reveal Himself to us, that God does speak to us, and that He does speak to humankind, particularly in the pages of this book. Now, He doesn't necessarily talk to us all the time, although there are times when, if you are listening to Him, He will. I mean, I've had God speak to me. I won't lie about that. It's only been on very rare occasions. When I got my call to the ordained ministry, I had dating a girl. She was Southern Baptist. We had a long kind of relationship, and We would argue about our faith all the time, and it made me delve into why I was a Lutheran, why I believed what I believed, and so on and so forth. And I thought I was going to marry her. I thought I was going to be with her the rest of my life. I was head over and heels in love with, being in love with her. Not necessarily with her, but head over heels of being in love. And I thought, hey, life is grand. I'm going to build my life around her and everything else like that. Well, she went to summer camp one summer and came back and called me up on the phone. And it wasn't a good phone call. At least in my perspective, it was a John phone call. I was very angry. I didn't sleep that night. Very upset. Got up the next morning. I kind of just walked straight out of the house. Didn't really acknowledge my family. Didn't go eat breakfast. Anything else. I went outside on our property. I was upset. I went and I hit a tree. I don't recommend that. It actually hurts. Do more damage to you than you do to the tree. But I finally walked to the very back of our property, with a fence line back there, and I just broke down. I just leaned up against the front fence post and I just cried. I was crying and crying and crying. And all of a sudden, in the midst of that crying and those tears, I remember looking up into the sky, and it was like time stopped. I was overcome with this huge sense of peace, this huge sense of calm, that everything was going to be okay. And I heard, you will be a pastor. I heard it. I was like, whoa. Of course, the feeling did not last too long, because it turns out there were fire ants on the fence post. Brings you back to reality real fast. I was like, but I went back inside and I told my mom and dad, I said, look, I'm going to be a pastor. I just got this call from God. I mean, he told me this is what I was going to do. And long and short of it, made my college choice to follow that call, have been pursuing it ever since. Yeah, God speaks. God speaks. But how do we come to know Him more and more deeply? How do we come to understand what He has been like? We go to where He revealed Himself to a particular people, and then most fully in Jesus. Again, we'll get to that. He does speak, but if we really, really want to know who He is, how He is, has shown Himself to be, we look at this book right here. Alright? Okay, let's continue to look more at what's going on in this text. Okay, in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was, what the word is used there? Good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the night day, and the darkness of the night. There was evening and there was morning the first day. Now, there are four things that are there in that opening statement that were around when God started creating. What were they? What are the four things that were around? No, not good and bad.
Darkness.
Darkness is one. No, lightness wasn't there yet.
Got any trees in the
Darkness.
Water. And wind.
And a special type of wind, actually. It says a wind from what?
God.
A wind from God, which, if you've ever seen the movie Twister, it came out many, many years ago. F5 tornado was called the finger of God, which meant it was the largest tornado that there could ever be. When the ancient Hebrews talked about this, when they said a wind from God, it meant a tremendous wind, a huge wind.
Killed all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it would just destroy you. That's the kind of wind that there was. Darkness, water, wind. There was one other word that was used there to describe things. I'll give you a hint. Void. A void. So this is the picture that you get of I mean, if you close your eyes and you think about darkness, a giant wind, water splashing all over the place in the midst of nothingness. That's kind of what's going on. And the word that I like to use to describe that is chaos. It was utter and complete chaos. And the first thing that God does is what? Does He pull up a hammer and a nail and hang a light bulb? What does He do?
He says, let there be light.
He says, he speaks. So God creates by speaking, which tells us something about God. It tells us about His power. That He doesn't have to do anything with His hands or anything else. All He has to do is speak and something happens. And the first thing He says is, let there be light, and there was light. Those of you who have studied the beginning of the universe, have you studied that in science yet?
Mm-hmm.
Big Bang. You know, that's the origin of the universe. 13 plus billion years ago, there was this explosion. All matter and everything else was in this little tiny spot. And all of a sudden the universe started expanding. It just started expanding. And of course the universe is full of water and darkness, and there was this huge wind kind of this explosion out of this void. And the first thing that happened after about 10,000 years, if I remember correctly the timeline, the first thing that occurred was this giant burst of light. The people who wrote the Bible had absolutely no scientific understanding. They did not view the universe in the way that we did, and so on and so forth. But isn't it kind of a coincidence, a pretty neat coincidence, that the first creative act that God did is say, let there be light. The first thing that happened in the beginning of our universe was a giant burst of light. Pretty cool. So, evening and morning, there's a first day. That's the second thing that we need to talk about real fast, because we get that word day, yom in Hebrew. Sometimes we get in a lot of trouble when we talk about these texts, because when we hear the word day, what do we think about? How long?
24 hours.
24 hours. We think 24 hours, and we think as we read through this text, 7 days of creation, did it take place in 7 24-hour days? Was our planet created in 7 24-hour days? No. No. Our planet is 4 billion years old, plus or minus a few 100,000 million years. 24 hours. No, the Earth was not created in 24-hour time span. 7 days, 1 week. No. There are ways that we understand this. 24 hours can be understood, or yom, day, could be understood actually as a long period of time. We can also understand this text, rather brilliantly, as some have understood, that the first day happens, and then between day 1 and day 2, which may be a 24-hour period, there is an extensive length of time that takes place between those 2 days. So day 1 happens when God speaks and creates light, and then millions, maybe billions of years go on, and then day 2 happens. So there's different ways of understanding this. We are not locked into a 7-day-a-week time period, okay? Just understand that, particularly when you may engage others who do not share your worldview. So, we come to verse 6, and God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome and the waters that were above the dome. And it was so. God called the dome sky. There was evening, there was morning the second day. What's kind of unique about hearing those 2 times? Verse 8 and verse 5, the end of verse 5. What's unique about that? What do you see that's kind of strange? What comes first? Light, but then
Morning and evening.
is it morning and evening?
Night.
What comes first?
Evening.
Evening and then morning. What's up with that? Is that the way we view the way a day goes?
No.
When does day start for us?
Morning.
When did they start here?
Evening.
Why?
That time of day.
Of course you don't know. I'm pulling that one on you. There's a reason. Because the ancient Jews, what happens to us at night? What do?
Sleep.
Sleep. So when we're asleep, who did they believe was working?
God.
God. Right. They believed God was up working, creating, working, having his hands involved in the world while we were sleeping. And then when morning came about, who is up and moving and working? Us. So God does his work at night, we do our work in the day. Which is more important, our work or God's work?
God's work.
So which should come first, God's work or our work?
God's work.
Bingo. So evening, God's work. Morning, our work. And that's why the Jews saw day as beginning at night, and then the rest of the afternoon actually starting at day. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Fun stuff. Let's go to verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the sky be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruits of every kind on the earth to bear fruit with the seed in it. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. And then God said, let there be lights in the dome in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. What's he talking about?
Time.
Lights in the sky to be for days, stars. Very good. Remember that. You might see a question about that. Let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light for the earth. And it was so. God made the two great lights. The greater light to rule the day, which would be the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, which would be the moon and the stars. God set them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. There was evening, there was morning, the fourth day. And then God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky. So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them and blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. That's kind of the first command that God gave to animals, to creatures. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. There was evening as there was morning the fifth day. And then God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle, creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind, and it was so. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. Now, what sets us apart from all the other creatures?
God made us in his image.
Very good. God created us in his image.
Can you just explain to me why we never really witnessed dinosaurs? Now I know there's time in between the 7 days.
You know, there's a lot of people who discuss this. You want to know Pastor Haug's take on this? Here's what Pastor Haug's take on this. Now, if we read through this text, you kind of get the sense of God kind of doing something and then standing back and going, what? It's what?
Good.
It's good. So, have you ever watched an artist paint sometimes? You know, they'll paint on the canvas and then they step back and they look at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they like what they see, they'll keep going. If they don't like what they see, what do? They
Fix it.
They fix stuff. Now, I can picture God going up here, and we know that God made the animals and so on and so forth before he made us, and I can see him making and being creative. Now, do you think God is just this, mess around and say, okay, I'll just get it done, I'll have it all? I see a picture of God being very creative, being kind of an artist like, and going, yeah, let me try this out, let me see what this looks like. And I see God like making a T-Rex and going, doesn't that look cool? That is awesome looking. And then going, wait a minute here. Eventually I want to make this creature who is made in my image, who will be able to think, who will be able to talk, who will be able to tell my story and what have you. And I'm probably going to be around 5.5, 6 feet tall, with some exceptions and variations and what have you. This image I have of this person created in my image looks really, really cool. Will be able to talk about me and interact with me. But I've got a problem, because I've got this T-Rex and I've got this man. If those two come into contact with each other, the T-Rex is going to eat the man. This is not good. So I'm going to take that T-Rex, I'm going to shrink him down and turn him into a bird. Because we know that many dinosaurs evolved into what?
Birds.
Yes. Most dinosaurs
I
evolved
didn't
into
know that.
birds.
You didn't know
Really?
Dinosaurs are not
So cool.
Yes, so I mean, if you think about kind of God's plan in that way, you have this idea of God thinking about us, keeping us in mind as He is making creation, and adapting His creation, adapting His artwork, so that we would be the pinnacle of creation. We're the apple of God's eye. In some ways, that is what it means to be made in God's image. It does not mean that God has a body like us, that God looks like us, moves like us, or anything else like that. We don't know exactly what God looks like, but we think what being made in God's image means is that we share kind of the creative characteristic. We share the ability to be able to work with creation and mold creation and to do things within creation, which is why God gave us a particular job. We are created in His image, and what is our job? If you look at verse 28, God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and then do what to it? Subdue it, and then have what? Dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds. Dominion means kind of oversight, control over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Now, the words in Hebrew, I don't remember them exactly, for subdue it and dominion carry the connotation of stewardship. Do you know what that word means? To be a steward means you have care over, you look over, you make sure that things work well and they work right, and it's preservation, keeping up, taking care of. Our role as created in the image of God is to help God create care of His creation. That's what we were created for. That's why we are made in His image. That's what we're here to do. So this is what God's plan was. This is how God put it all together. We continue in verse 29. And God said, see, I've given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw that everything that He had made, indeed it was
Very good.
very good. There's a big difference between just good and very good. There's a reason for that. The Hebrew word here, tov, which can be translated good, but it can also mean it fits. Like when you go into the store and you have a really nice shirt that you'd like to buy, you got to try it on. And Sometimes it fits and sometimes it doesn't, but in this case, God said it fits. And not only does it fit just a little bit, it fits perfectly. So if you can imagine God, when He finishes creation, when He finishes everything that He is doing, He stands back, He looks at creation and goes, wow, it really fits. It really works. It really comes together beautifully. It's awesome. It's essentially what God is saying. It's awesome. It all works together. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. We're going to finish this up real quick as we go into chapter 2. And we're going to talk about it for just a little bit. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished in all their multitude, and on the seventh day God finished the work that He had done, and He did what?
Rested on the
seventh day from all the work that He had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that He had done in creation. Now, I think the important thing here is to see that God rested. In our society, do we do a very good job of getting rest? You hope sometimes.
Probably 8 hours.
But most of us are moving and blowing and going every single day of the week. If the creator of the universe needed a day of rest, don't you think you do?
Yes.
Yes.
It's very important for us to realize that sometimes we too need a Sabbath.
Sabbath day.
That's what it's called, Sabbath. It's a day of rest. A day to be fed, to recover, to recuperate. We need that day.
Sunday.
Sunday is generally the day of rest that we usually, it's not a day of rest for me, but
Well, that's-
usually it is a day of rest. Yeah, but for most. And
That's the day you work the
Yeah,
most.
that's like the day.
that's the day I work the most. Yes, it is. But I have a great privilege, because what I do is I tell people about God, and when we get to the idea of what the gospel is, I will help you know that what I do is try to put out a certain type of food that brings fulfillment. Get into that a little later. But I'm privileged to be able to do that. It's an honor to. So, one of the things we need to talk about a little bit is, as we read through this chapter, what is good news? What is the good news we see as we read through this chapter? What are some of the things? Read.
God making us.
Yeah, God created us. And everything. Okay, so that's some of the good news. What are some other good pieces of good news that you can take from this?
Everything's fitting perfectly.
Everything fits perfectly. So that's very good, Rice, because remember we started with chaos and we worked down to everything fits. And we're going to come back to that in just a little bit, because that's something to we're going to really have to deal with. What else is something good that we see? What do we understand about God? What have we come to know about Him? What do we know about Him as we read this?
He's like the best at everything.
Well, He's the best at everything. Yeah, he's very powerful.
Yet still kind. He doesn't abuse his power.
Yeah, doesn't abuse power. He's creative. In all the other creation stories, in all the other world religions, just about all of them, the way the world is created by the deity, their version of God, is either by warfare or by violence. That's just about every other creation. in the Christian story, do you see that happening here? Do you see violence?
Not at all.
No.
Do you see warfare?
No. Zero.
No. This is one of the only creation stories out there where God creates out of just a pure desire and love of creation. And so that's one of the things we learn about God. He is creative. He creates with all of this power out of love, not out of violence. Because there's a reason, he wants to share the love that he has. We'll get into that a little later. But he wants to share the great love that he already experiences with us. And so he is creative. So we learn all about it, and we learn one more thing that is good news. Rest. That's important, we get rest. We learn that we are created in the image of God. We are the apple of God's eye. These are all important things that we learn. And it's good news, but it's not the gospel. It's not the good news. Why? Because God took chaos and made everything fit. But as you look around the world today, does everything fit?
No.
No, it doesn't. Something's gone haywire. Something's wrong. Is there still good in the world?
Yes.
Absolutely. But there's some stuff that happens that ain't right, that is wrong, that doesn't fit anymore. And so while it is good that God took chaos and brought about something where everything fits, we know that's not the way the world is working now. So this can't be the good news. The good news we will begin to discover as we say, why doesn't everything fit? And we will do that next month. Any questions? None?